In a tense and highly charged Senate hearing, Senator Adam Schiff took aim at White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt, mocking her with the clear intent to belittle her in front of the public. But Leavitt, poised and razor-sharp, fired back, with a stunning response that not only silenced Schiff, but left the entire chamber in stunned silence. Before we dive into the full story, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more breaking updates. The atmosphere in the Washington Capitol hearing room was electric, thick with tension. Cameras rolled. Spotlights lit up the normally somber space, which now felt more like a political battleground than a place of governance. What was supposed to be a routine accountability session quickly escalated into something much more dramatic. Karoline Leavitt sat upright, eyes sharp and unwavering. As the spokesperson for President Donald Trump's administration, she exuded calm and control. Across from her, Senator Schiff leaned back in his chair, a smirk playing on his lips as he prepared to deliver what he thought would be a humiliating blow. "Ladies and gentlemen," Schiff began, voice laced with condescension, "how does it feel to be a young press secretary constantly parroting President Trump's words like a hired mouthpiece?" A few chuckles rippled through the room. The tension thickened. Leavitt didn't blink. The cameras zoomed in as Schiff leaned forward, his sarcasm deepening. "Miss Leavitt, do you even understand why you're here? Or are you just another young woman trying to defend the indefensible?" The room fell into a pregnant silence. Leavitt remained composed, unshaken. She blinked slowly, looked Schiff dead in the eye, and slightly pursed her lips. The mood shifted. Everyone could feel it. Schiff doubled down, his voice now thick with arrogance. "Perhaps if you spent less time posting online and more time learning the actual responsibilities of a press secretary, you'd be able to answer these questions properly." More laughter followed, echoing through the marble-lined hall. Reporters scribbled notes. Cameras zoomed tighter. Leavitt glanced toward the observation gallery, where President Trump sat expressionless. Beside him, First Lady Melania Trump watched, with subtle pride. Secret Service agents stood like statues behind them. Leavitt didn't look back. Turning calmly toward the committee, she began. "I came here to talk about the truth," she said, voice cool but firm. "But it seems some people wouldn't recognize the truth even if it stood right in front of them." A beat of stunned silence followed. Schiff raised his eyebrows. "The truth? From you?" he sneered. "Please, go ahead." With a faint smile, Leavitt reached for a document in front of her, a thick sheet bearing the official federal seal. "I wasn't planning to bring this up today," she said, her tone measured. "But since we're speaking so boldly about the truth..." She slid the document across the table, eyes locked with Schiff's. Every lens in the room turned to her. "Senator Schiff," she continued, voice now steely, "you can mock my age, my role, and my experience, but your name appears in a federal investigation report involving the misuse of $12 million in COVID relief funds." The chamber erupted. Gasps filled the room. Melania Trump leaned toward her husband and whispered, "She actually did it." Schiff visibly recoiled, sinking back in his seat, mouth opening but no sound coming out. The committee chairman banged his gavel in vain. "Order! Order in the room!" But Leavitt's words still hung heavy, like smoke after a fire. Reporters sprang into action, scribbling furiously. Phones buzzed with breaking news alerts. Karoline Leavitt exposes Schiff in live Senate hearing. Senator Ellen Harper leaned toward a colleague. "What just happened?" Senator Michael Tran, stunned, replied, "She did it." Leavitt remained, standing, holding the document high. "This isn't just evidence," she said. "It's a mirror for every American watching. This is what happens when leaders mock instead of serve, when they believe no one's watching, but we are." In the back, a young aide from Virginia, long inspired by Leavitt, wiped away tears. Suddenly Schiff shot up. "This is a fabrication, desperation," he shouted. "You're trying to distract from..." "You're just..." Leavitt cut him off, her voice soft yet unshakably firm. "No, Senator Schiff, I'm just speaking the truth. Something you haven't done in a very long time." The hearing room buzzed with murmurs. This wasn't just a heated exchange. It was a turning point. A storm was building, and millions were watching it unfold live on CNN, Fox News, Newsmax, and even international networks that had broken into regular programming to air the moment. Schiff reached for his water glass, but his hand trembled. "I demand a recess," he barked, but his voice cracked. Leavitt didn't move. She didn't flinch. Instead, she calmly opened her folder and pulled out another document. "This isn't just about your name being on one report, Senator," she said, sliding the paper forward. "These are bank transfer receipts, COVID relief funds, meant for struggling small businesses during the pandemic, funds that you funneled into offshore shell accounts." The room erupted with gasps. A reporter dropped their microphone. A senator buried their face in their hands. From the observation area, Melania Trump whispered, "She's not stopping." President Trump remained still, his cold gaze fixed on Schiff, as if he had been waiting for this moment all along. Schiff looked around, his face drained of color. I didn't know about that money." Leavitt's voice turned quiet, almost gentle. "You knew. You signed the papers. You appointed family members to manage the shell company. I wasn't going to bring this here today. But when you mocked me in front of the nation, you weren't just mocking me. You were mocking every American who still believes in honesty." She turned to face the cameras. "You mocked every single person who trusted this government to help them survive. You mocked every small business owner who watched their dream die during lockdowns. Every mother who skipped meals to feed her children." Schiff collapsed into his chair, as if the weight of her words struck him physically. The hearing was no longer a formality. It had become a reckoning. In Virginia, a mother of 3 who had lost her job during the pandemic wiped tears from her cheeks. In an Oregon hospital break room, a nurse paused while feeding a patient and turned up the TV. In a Nebraska diner, grown men fell silent, their eyes locked on the screen. Back in the chamber, Leavitt pressed on. "You didn't steal from billionaires, Senator. You stole from veterans, from teachers, from single parents, from people who still believed in this country." Schiff tried to stand, but his knees gave out. An aide rushed to steady him. Leavitt stepped forward, not as a political figure, but as a young woman representing millions of Americans. "I'm not saying this to destroy you," she said, her voice trembling now with emotion. "I'm saying it because the truth still matters. You tried to humiliate me, but all you did was remind me who I'm really fighting for." A single tear rolled down her cheek. And with that, the entire room broke. Even Senator Daniel Brooks, once one of Leavitt's most vocal critics, wiped his eyes. Across America, the moment went viral. News clips spread like wildfire. Within minutes, social media exploded with the footage of Leavitt dismantling Schiff. Live before the nation. Outside the Capitol, reporters scrambled, shouting questions. Back inside, Leavitt finally sat, her expression calm but her posture unyielding, the eye of the storm. She whispered to her aide, "I wasn't trying to win. I just wanted the truth to be heard." From the gallery, President Trump leaned toward Melania and said quietly, "That's what leadership looks like. She doesn't shout. She stands firm." On the hearing floor, Schiff sat speechless. His aides whispered frantically, their phones lighting up with messages from lawyers, donors, and allies in panic. Leavitt didn't smile. Her heart was heavy. This wasn't about scoring political points, and it was about real people, real loss, real pain. In the hallway, a janitor, an elderly Vietnam veteran named Samuel, stopped to shake her hand. "You did what I fought for in Nam," he said softly. "You spoke the truth when it was hardest." Leavitt nodded, quietly, humbly. This wasn't about applause. It was about waking up a country. Back in her office, her phone buzzed relentlessly. Calls from governors, senators, pastors, factory workers, and mothers. One call came from a teacher in Idaho. "I showed my class your clip," the teacher said. "One of my students cried. He said it was the first time he saw someone fight for people like his dad, who lost everything." Leavitt's eyes blurred. She turned to her aide. "Get in touch with the Justice Department. I want them to open an investigation. Schiff's actions didn't just break laws, they broke lives. They deserve justice." The aide hesitated. This could start a war in Congress. Leavitt stood tall, Then let it come. As Schiff attempted to exit the hearing room, reporters swarmed him. Do you deny the evidence? Did you misuse relief funds, Senator? Schiff said nothing. The world already knew. No comment, Schiff snapped, but the panic in his voice said it all. Inside the chamber, senators began to slowly file out, the tension still thick in the air. But one figure remained behind, a young congresswoman named Hannah Coleman. She approached Leavitt, her eyes red. My father was a truck driver, she said quietly. He died during the pandemic. His company never got any relief. She swallowed hard. You just answered the question I've carried for 3 years. Leavitt didn't respond with words. She simply opened her arms and Coleman fell into them sobbing. That night, while Washington buzzed with speculation and shock, Leavitt returned to her office. On her desk sat a single envelope, no return address, handwritten. She opened it carefully. Dear Miss Leavitt, my name is Emma. I'm 10. My mom cried watching you on TV. She said you made her believe again. My dad used to say no one in Washington cares, but I think you do. Thank you for making my mom smile. She hasn't smiled in so long. Leavitt folded the letter and pressed it to her chest. Moved beyond words, she thought of Emma, her mother, and the millions like them. People in shuttered towns working in vanishing industries who had felt invisible for far too long. This was never about power. It was always about people. She turned on the TV. Schiff was speaking again, denying everything, calling the documents fake. But this time, America didn't believe him. I didn't break the system, Leavitt whispered. I just held up a mirror. Outside, crowds had begun to gather, not in anger but in quiet solidarity. They waved flags. They held homemade signs. Thank you, Karoline. As dusk settled over Washington, church bells rang from a small chapel near the Capitol. Inside, a few gathered, not to pray but to reflect. On the screen in front of them, Leavitt's words played again. An older man, Jacob, a retired miner from Montana, leaned on his cane and listened. His relief funds had vanished during the pandemic while politicians argued. As he heard Leavitt speak the truth, he broke down. I thought no one would speak for people like us anymore, he whispered. Back in her dim Capitol office, Leavitt reviewed every document again, double-checking each detail for accuracy. Her phone buzzed. President Trump. You okay, Karoline? He asked. Yes, Mr. President, she replied, her voice calm but resolute. I didn't mean for it to go that far. Trump chuckled. That's exactly why it worked. There was a pause then. Get ready. They'll come for you now. She looked out the window at the growing crowd below. I know, she said, unafraid. By morning, her image was everywhere. Not on attack ads, but on homemade posters, digital billboards, and social media posts from grateful citizens. A mother in Nevada wrote, My son asked me what honesty looks like. I showed him Karoline Leavitt's clip. And the quote that echoed across the country. Senator Schiff, you can mock my youth, but your name appears in a federal investigation involving $12 million in misused COVID relief funds. Students quoted it in high schools from Alabama to Oregon. In barbershops, churches, and boardrooms, Karoline Leavitt's courage became the topic of conversation. But in Capitol offices, a different kind of energy spread. Panic. Schiff's team scrambled. Lawyers flooded in. Political allies began to quietly distance themselves. Leavitt's chief aide entered, wide-eyed. Ma'am, the Oversight Committee just called an emergency session. They want you there. Leavitt nodded. Then we go. Her aide hesitated. Schiff might retaliate. Leavitt turned to her, unwavering. I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid of what happens if we stop telling the truth. Just then her phone buzzed again. Her mother. The kids saw you on TV, she said, her voice trembling. They said, you looked like a superhero. Leavitt's hand shook, not from fear, but from the weight of what she now carried. This wasn't just about Schiff anymore. It was about every American who had been silenced. Outside, the crowd grew larger. But it wasn't a protest in the traditional sense. There was no rage, no screaming. Just quiet resolve. Just hope. A woman named Sarah had driven overnight from Wisconsin. She held a photo of her late husband and 2 children. Approaching a Capitol staffer, she said, "Please, give this to Miss Leavitt." On the way to the Oversight Committee chamber, a security guard handed Leavitt the envelope. Inside was a letter. "My husband died after our small business was denied emergency relief. Later, we learned the money went to shell companies. Today, you showed me justice still exists in this country. Thank you. You changed our lives." Leavitt stood still, eyes wet. Her aide leaned in. "Ma'am, they're waiting." She wiped her eyes, nodded, and stepped inside. The Oversight Committee. Room was tense. Schiff sat at the far end, pale, rigid. Cameras rolled, reporters filled the edges of the chamber. Leavitt took her seat. No prepared remarks, no teleprompter, just her and a watching nation. Outside, Sarah stood quietly among the crowd. Her tears were not of pain, but of something deeper. Hope. Inside, the room fell still. Schiff didn't meet Leavitt's eyes. His fingers tapped nervously on the table. Senator Margaret Evans, the committee chair, cleared her throat. "Miss Leavitt, before we begin, would you like to make a statement?" Leavitt rose slowly. No podium. No index cards. Just her. "I didn't come here for drama," she said softly. "I didn't come to play politics. I came because the American people deserve to know someone sees them." She looked directly at Schiff. "We are here because citizens entrusted us with their taxes, their pain, their dreams. But when that trust was broken, when that money was stolen, their dreams turned into debt, and no one answered them." She held up Sarah's letter. "This woman isn't asking for revenge, she just wants the truth." She paused. "I owe her that, and so do you." Some committee members bowed their heads, ashamed. A few avoided eye contact entirely. Senator Laura Mitchell, a longtime ally of Adam Schiff, leaned forward. Her tone was sharp, defensive. "Miss Leavitt, are you implying criminal allegations?" Karoline Leavitt didn't flinch. "I'm not implying," she replied, her voice unwavering. "I'm submitting evidence." She raised a thick red folder, clearly marked and carefully sealed. Inside are documents, timestamps, bank transfer records, and sworn testimony from Senator Schiff's former staff. Evidence that he funneled emergency relief funds into shell organizations controlled by his own family. Gasps erupted across the room. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. Schiff's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Leavitt continued, calm but firm. "This isn't personal. It's the truth. And if we ignore it, we tell every struggling American that corruption wins." Senator Michael Tran wiped his eyes, visibly moved. Leavitt turned toward the observation gallery. "I know this may cost me everything," she said, "but I didn't come here to make friends. I came here so that people like Sarah, like Emma, like the forgotten families across this country, finally have someone who sees them." The room fell into a rare and sacred silence. For the first time in decades, the Senate hearing room wasn't just a stage for politics. It was a place of reckoning. Leavitt didn't stand there as a politician. She stood as a patriot, and through their screens, Americans watched and wept. Suddenly, Schiff stood. His face was flushed, his hands shaking. "This is a smear campaign," he shouted. "It's all lies. None of this holds legal weight." Leavitt didn't argue. She simply handed the red folder to Committee Chair Margaret Evans. Evans studied it for a moment, then passed it to the committee clerk. "I propose a formal investigation," Evans said, her voice grave. "I second," Senator Emily Carter called out. Schiff's chair creaked as he sank back into it, furious. "This is a witch hunt," he yelled. "You're all insane." Leavitt looked at him calmly. "No, Senator, this is justice." Cameras clicked furiously as Schiff bolted from the room. His footsteps echoed through the marble halls, a symbol in motion. He wasn't running from Leavitt. He was running from the truth. Outside the Capitol, the crowd swelled, black and white, rich and poor, rural and urban. Some waved flags. Others simply held up signs. "Thank you, Karoline." Maria, a mother from Idaho, lifted her toddler toward a jumbotron screen broadcasting the hearing. "She's why you can have a better future," she whispered to her child. Across the country, Americans wept together, not from sorrow but from something far more powerful, a moment of shared hope. In a small Georgia ER, Nurse Sophia Lee stood beside an elderly patient's bed, IV drip in hand. The muted TV in the corner caught her eye, Leavitt's face. She turned up the volume, the red folder, Schiff's silence, the stunned committee. She watched, trembling. Her brother had lost his small business during the pandemic. His relief application was denied. He never recovered. Now she knew where some of that money had gone. The elderly patient, voice frail, whispered, "That girl, she's speaking for us." Sophia nodded. "She is." Tears ran down her cheeks. Not from grief, but from long-awaited relief. In a room full of beeping monitors, hope poured in from the television screen. She picked up her phone and texted. Her sister one-word watch later. After her call with President Trump, Leavitt sat alone in her office, the weight of a nation pressing down on her shoulders. "If they matter, if the truth matters," she whispered into the quiet. Trump's words lingered in her ear. "America needed a moment, and you delivered it." She didn't feel powerful. She felt heavy, but ready. For the first time in years, someone had stood where no one dared. And across America, something rare was happening. People didn't just watch, they felt. In a Louisiana diner, an old man named Henry rose from his booth and whispered, "That girl Karoline, she has the soul of a justice warrior." On an Oregon farm, a divided family gathered around a laptop and cried together. In classrooms, teachers paused lessons to talk about truth. In truck stops and factory floors, in living rooms and church pews, Leavitt's words echoed. "Senator Schiff, you can mock my youth, but your name appears in a federal investigation regarding $12 million in misused COVID relief funds." This wasn't about Schiff anymore. It was about every working mother, every forgotten veteran, every teenager who feared the world had no place for them. Back in her office, Leavitt sat in silence, her hands clasped tightly. Mr. Thomas, the Capitol, janitor, passed by. He stopped, tipped his cap. She stood and shook his hand. "Thank you," she said. "No," he replied, eyes misty. "Thank you for making us feel human." That night, as cities lit up with headlines and hashtags, something extraordinary stirred across America. For the first time in years, the nation began to believe in itself again. Washington settled into a fragile quiet. Then, without fanfare, another envelope appeared at Karoline Leavitt's office. No stamp, no return address. Just her name, handwritten in soft blue ink. She opened it slowly. Inside was a photograph. A young soldier in uniform, James, holding a baby in his arms. Tucked behind it was a letter, its handwriting unsteady. "Miss Leavitt, my husband died waiting for aid your opponent blocked. He served with honor, but our paperwork was lost. Then I found out millions went to shell companies. Today, watching you speak, I felt seen for the first time. You gave my husband dignity even though he's gone. Please don't stop." Leavitt placed the letter on her desk as though it were sacred. She stared at James's face, still, resolute, angry. This wasn't about politics anymore. It was about what this country owes to those who gave everything. She vowed, then and there, they would not be forgotten again. Outside the Capitol, the crowd grew. No shouting, just presence. Among them was Ethan, a 10-year-old in a wheelchair, a cancer survivor from rural Nevada. His mother had brought him all the way to D.C. Ethan had written a letter for Leavitt but hadn't been able to deliver it. So instead he held a sign, hand-scrawled in careful block letters. "My hospital almost closed. Thank you for fighting." A news camera caught the image. By morning, Ethan's name trended across the country. Inside her office, an aide appeared. "Ma'am, There's a boy outside. With a sign. It's going viral. Leavitt paused. What's his name? Ethan. Without hesitation, she stood and walked out. Past security, past press lines. No podium, no speech. She found Ethan in the crowd, knelt to his level, and looked into his eyes. You're why I stand up, she said. You're the real warrior. Ethan smiled, eyes shining. You didn't yell, he said. You just told the truth. Leavitt hugged him as the cameras clicked. By nightfall, the photo of Karoline and Ethan holding hands adorned walls in classrooms, living rooms, and churches across the nation. That evening, the Senate committee reconvened, but something had shifted. Schiff's chair sat empty. Leavitt entered slowly. No tie. Just an American flag pin and neatly folded notes in her hands. Everyone stood, not by protocol but out of respect. No one spoke until Senator Anna Coleman quietly asked, Miss Leavitt, would you like to speak? Karoline stood at the front of the room. Her gaze was steady. I didn't come here to destroy anyone, she said, voice low but clear. I came to protect those who no longer have a voice in this room. I'm not proud of what happened today, but I'm proud that America finally looked in the mirror. Then she did something no one expected. She sat down and said nothing. For 1 full minute, the chamber sat in complete silence. No sound. No grandstanding. Just stillness. A silence that spoke louder than any speech, for the forgotten lives, the buried dreams, the unheard voices. Even the most skeptical senator felt something break inside. Because sometimes, true silence echoes deepest. At dawn, before the next session resumed, a man stood quietly on the Capitol steps. David Marshall, a Vietnam veteran. His jacket was faded, shoes worn thin, but he stood tall, dignity in every breath. In his hands, a neatly folded American flag. People passed by, unaware of why he was there, unmoved by the quiet weight he carried. Inside, Leavitt reviewed case files, stories of the invisible, the unpaid, the unseen, the unheard. An aide entered. Ma'am, there's a veteran outside. He doesn't want media. Just a moment with you. She stood and walked out. David saluted her, crisp and respectful. She returned the gesture. I buried my brother after the pandemic, he said, voice tight. His business went under. They blamed the system. Now I know the system was rigged. He held out the folded flag. He served too. This was his. But today you deserve it more than anyone I've seen in decades. Leavitt's voice cracked. I can't take this. David's eyes filled. You already have. By speaking, for the ones who are gone. She pressed the flag to her chest, eyes brimming with tears. Silence blanketed the Capitol once again, not of grief, but reverence. Leavitt returned to the hearing room, the flag still in her arms. Schiff's seat remained empty, but the nation was watching more closely than ever. She stepped to the podium, then paused. I have one final file, she said, lifting a yellow envelope. This one's different. It's not just about stolen money. It's about lives destroyed, and a cover-up deeper than we thought. Murmurs swept the room. Chairwoman Margaret Evans raised her gavel. Order. Leavitt opened the envelope. Inside, phone logs, private emails, whistleblower testimony. She looked directly into the cameras. This file shows that Senator Schiff's office delayed relief funds to targeted districts for political retaliation. American families suffered, just to score headlines. Gasps filled the chamber. A senator stood. That's a crime. Leavitt nodded. It is. And it happened. I don't need to shout, I just need the truth to speak. She placed the file on the table, then stepped back. Not when Schiff mocked her. Not even when she answered him. But in that moment, and when the truth stood taller than anyone in the room, the nation felt something shift, and the reaction rippled. Across America, tears fell like rain. In Ohio nursing homes, Texas school cafeterias, fire stations in Maine, pickup trucks pulled over on dusty country roads. This wasn't politics anymore. It was betrayal. Finally seen, finally named, and, for the first time in a long time, people felt heard. In Missouri, a man collapsed to his knees on his kitchen floor, sobbing. My father begged for help, and no one answered. Now someone has. In Seattle, a teacher replayed Leavitt's words for her students. No one looked away. In living rooms across the nation, families on opposite sides of the political aisle sat together, not arguing, but crying. Karoline Leavitt's actions hadn't been scripted. This was no political theater. It was truth, unflinching, unvarnished, delivered by a young woman with nothing to gain and everything to lose. As the sun dipped behind the Capitol dome, a young girl, she folded the paper. Her voice was low, warm, unwavering. The truth only needs one person brave enough to whisper it. She paused, letting the silence speak, then continued. I didn't expose Adam Schiff out of hatred. I did it because silence is killing this country. I spoke for the small towns, the hospital rooms, the truck drivers, the widows, the children, the ones who have nothing left but hope. A gentle breath. Then, and I'd do it again, if I had to. The clip spread instantly, from neighborhoods, in Kansas to cafes in Seoul. Not because it was viral, but because it was real. Leavitt's words didn't stir division. They reminded America what it had almost lost, its heart. That night she returned to the Capitol quietly. No press, no cameras, just her. She passed Schiff's vacant chair, cold, empty. She stopped, looked at it for a long moment, then whispered, "This was once a seat of arrogance," and walked on. Outside the hearing room, Ethan, the boy from Nevada, waited in his wheelchair, his mother behind him, holding a folded drawing. Leavitt knelt. Ethan handed her the picture. She was standing atop a mountaintop, tiny stick figures, below holding signs that read truth, hope, my dad, justice. Her eyes filled. I didn't climb this mountain alone, she whispered. You all pushed me up. Ethan smiled. You didn't yell. You just stood strong. She hugged him, gently but firmly, then rose and looked up at the Capitol dome. I didn't come here to win, she said. I came to serve. Those words weren't rehearsed. They weren't politics. They were pure. That night, Leavitt returned to Virginia. No parade, no spotlight. Just home, family, and quiet. As she sat on the porch beneath a sky full of stars, a knock came. Sarah, the widow, stood at the door, her son Noah by her side. I had to thank you in person, Sarah said. Leavitt shook her head, overcome. I didn't do much. Sarah placed her hand on Leavitt's. You gave a broken country a voice. Noah looked up. You made my mom believe again. Leavitt turned away, but a tear slid down. Not for politics or glory, but for every letter, every hug, every unseen hand she carried with her into that hearing room. Across America, her words touched lives. In a Kentucky coffee shop, a waitress named Lisa paused, tears falling as she watched. In a Wisconsin factory, workers huddled around a phone. Someone had finally said what they'd lived. In a Florida classroom, a teacher named Miss Elena asked, "What is courage?" A student replied, "It's Miss Karoline, she's not afraid." Online, hashtags like Karoline Truth and Leavitt Speak spread like wildfire, not as trends, but as testaments. Young people, mothers, veterans all shared their stories of pain and perseverance. But Karoline Leavitt didn't seek attention. She returned to her work in the Trump administration, but her heart stayed with Sarah, Noah, Ethan, and the millions more she stood for. She kept Noah's crayon on her desk, a small, simple reminder of the promise she had made. President Trump posted on Truth Social, calling her the flame of truth. Meanwhile, the Senate Ethics Committee moved swiftly. Headlines blared, "Leavitt ignites justice." But for her, justice was never the goal. Dignity was. In a Georgia church, a pastor read aloud a letter from a parishioner thanking Leavitt for restoring their faith. In Montana, students made posters. "Thank you for fighting for us." In Washington, crowds still gathered, not in protest but in gratitude. A mother named Maria held up a photo of her son, lost to the pandemic. Leavitt didn't just speak, she said through tears. She listened. Her words, like Leavitt's, didn't divide. They healed. Karoline. Leavitt knew the road ahead would be long. The attacks would come. The press would dissect every move. But she wasn't afraid. She had chosen to stand, for Ethan, for Noah, for all those who had no voice. The story of Karoline Leavitt facing down Adam Schiff in a public hearing wasn't about one moment. It was about restoring what politics had forgotten: honesty, courage, and human dignity. She didn't act for fame, but for Sarah, for David, the veteran, for the forgotten towns in Louisiana and Nevada. From the silent minute she gave to the evidence she exposed, her every step was a reminder that truth, when spoken sincerely, changes everything. Noah's letter. Ethan's drawing. David's folded flag. These weren't props. They were symbols of a country yearning to trust again. And the lesson: be like Leavitt. Speak truth, not to wound, but to wake. Listen like she did. Act when others stay silent. And above all, carry the crayon, the small, quiet reminder that honesty, empathy, and accountability still matter. Because, as Karoline showed us all, truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs someone brave enough to speak it.